Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Angela Reiss. I'm one of the pastors here. And this morning, I am wondering if you have ever seen the show Storage Wars. It is not on TV anymore, but it was a reality TV show that took you into the world of storage auctions. I don't know if you know this, but when somebody doesn't pay on their storage unit for a few months, it's put up for auction. And on this show, camera crews traveled with professional buyers to all these different facilities where they participated in cash-only bidding wars. And the buyers were given just a really small opportunity to just kind of look inside the unit and determine if it held junk or treasure. And they weren't allowed to touch anything or move anything, so it was always a gamble. And like all reality TV, it had a lot of drama. A lot of drama. And I know this because my husband and I watched it for quite too much, I think for a couple years. Now, I want you to imagine somebody just bursting onto the scene of that auction, begging and pleading with the auctioneer not to sell their unit. It would have made for reality TV gold. Like, it would have been gold. Well, I don't have to imagine that scenario because I lived it. Like, that is an actual stored memory in my mind. Like, I am that someone. I was raised in church. From the time I was born, I was pretty much there 3 times a week. But when I was a teenager, I made some choices that didn't align with what I learned growing up in church. You know, I don't know if you know this, but being a teenager is really hard. And I had experienced some childhood trauma that was bubbling up in me, and to try to numb some of those memories and some of that pain, I chose to participate in some risky activities over doing what I had learned was God's best for me. I became a teenage mother at the age of 16. I was married right out of high school and had my second child at the age of 19. Not long after that, I realized that I was in a really unhealthy, abusive marriage, which took a lot of courage to leave, but I did. And I moved to my mom's house with my 2 little kids in tow. And I remember the morning after I got there, I was laying on the couch with my eyes closed because I have a big family and I didn't want to talk to anyone, and there really wasn't a private space available for me at the time, and so I was just laying there. And I heard my younger sisters talking about me and my situation as they were getting ready for school that morning. And I heard one of them say, 2 kids at 19, her life is so over. And tears just started to well up in my eyes because they were voicing exactly what I was feeling. I was a mess. I was a mess, and my life did feel like it was over. It wasn't. But I continued to be a mess for a few more years. You know, I still had all of that childhood trauma with all the new stuff just kind of piled up on top of there. And I was just in a perpetuating cycle of pain and dysfunction. And to try to escape that, I put my hope in all the things that our culture says is important: clothes, cars, status, beauty. And, you know, I was looking for things to make me feel whole. And nothing did. Nothing worked. But I still was making a lot of bad choices, a lot of bad financial decisions. And so I got to this place where within the span of a week, I was fired from my job, my car was repossessed, and I received notification that my storage unit was going to be auctioned off. And that was the last straw for me. And so I called the storage facility because I needed to fix something. You ever get to a place where you're just like, I need one thing to go right? So I called them. And the manager there, she said, Angela, your unit is up for auction today. Like, there is nothing that you can do. And she hung up the phone. Well, I did not receive that. And so I still needed to fix it. And so I drove there. I went there. And I just busted up into the auction. The gate was open. Normally it's locked gate, but it was open because of the auction. And so I just went into the auction in the middle of all of these people that are standing there, right to the auctioneer who had no idea who I was. And I was like begging him not to sell my unit. And the facility manager was there. And so she came over to me and she gently guided me away from all these people who are like, who is this crazy woman? And she told me, Angela, your unit has already been sold. You can't do anything. You need to leave, which I did not do. Instead, I went to the unit, which was no longer mine, and I just kind of leaned my back up against it, and I slid down the door of the unit until I was on the ground sobbing. And the guy who bought my unit witnessed all of this, and he came over and he very kindly offered to sell it back to me for what he paid for it, which I could not afford. And I looked at him and I said, all I have is $300. Like, that's literally all I have in my bank account. And he graciously accepted that. Not only did he choose to lose money that day, he offered to help me unpack the whole unit and move it out because it needed to be emptied by the end of the day, and I didn't have a way to do that. And so he helped me empty it out. He had so much compassion on me. But later that night, I was sitting in my room surrounded by all of this stuff that I thought was so important, and some of it was actually important. But as I sat there looking at all of these things, I realized that I actually had nothing left. I had nothing left. And in that moment, I completely broke. I reached the end of myself, and I cried out to God. And in God's tender, loving kindness, God ran to me. I felt it in my spirit. It was like God just scooped me up, just let me climb up in his lap and cry my little heart out, confessing all the things, repenting from all the things. And I just felt like God wrap me up and sing songs of peace and comfort and reassurance over my heart. Because that is who God is. That is who God is. Last week, Jacob started a two-part look at the story of the prodigal son. He shared about his son's journey of leaving home with his inheritance in his pocket, and how he squandered every single cent of it, and then returned home to be met by his father with extravagant love and grace and a huge celebration, because the greatest joy for God is when his children find their way back to him, his greatest joy. And I get the prodigal son. I am the prodigal daughter. But the story doesn't end there. There's another brother, the older brother. And his reaction to his father's grace is just as important for us to understand. So here's the story that Jesus shared about him. We're going to begin at Luke 15, verse 25. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. So the celebration was already in full swing when the older brother returned from a hard day of working in the field. And it didn't take long for him to find out that this party was for his selfish younger brother, the one who had taken his inheritance and run. And to make matters worse, this prize calf, the one the older son had most likely cared for and helped to raise through his own hard work, was now the centerpiece of the feast. And the older brother became angry, and he refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. Now, I want to remind you that this is not a true story, okay? It's an illustration that Jesus shared as a way to teach a lesson. But I think what we can derive from it is that the older brother, he spent a lot of time thinking about his situation, right? I think as humans, we can understand that. He had to live in the aftermath of what his brother did. Jewish people lived in a very honor-shame culture. And what his brother did was very public and would have brought great shame upon their family. And day in and day out, he would have had to live in the judgment of his community. He would have had to take on more work, right, on the farm, lots of time to think about what his father did, why he made the decision he made, what his brother took, why he took it, time to think about his own inheritance and what he deserved. I imagine him out there just toiling for years, just grumbling and stewing over his circumstance as bitterness and resentment grew in his heart. Because Luke tells us in chapter 6 that a good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. Well, the first thing out of this older son's mouth, when he learned that there was a party because his brother had come home, was anger and resentment, entitlement, jealousy, right? That's what was stored up in his heart. He said to his dad, "All these years I've been slaving for you, working hard for you, taking care of you and this place. I've never disobeyed you. I did everything you asked of me, and you've never given me anything." He'd kept a mental checklist of all the ways he'd been obedient and did the right thing and compared his list to his brother's self-indulgent, reckless behavior. And he's like, why does this guy, right, this son of yours, not his brother, you know a family member is mad when they're like, your son, your daughter, right? His brother was dead to him. He's like, why does this son of yours deserve anything? And his father, in humility and love, said to him, "My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." After my prodigal coming home moment, I tried really hard to be a faithful follower of Jesus and someone who was willing to do the things God asked of me. And after a lot of years of what I will call faithful obedience, I felt like God was asking me to do something that required me to push through a lot of fear, okay? A lot of fear. And initially, I didn't want to do it. But God had been so faithful to me. And so I wanted to continue to be faithful to God in return. And so I said yes. And by the time the starting line for this thing approached, like my whole mindset had switched. Like I was really excited about it. I felt like Elle Woods on her first day of Harvard Law School, okay? Meaning like I was ready. I was ready for it. And then everything in my world shifted, including my relationships. In today's cultural terms, you could say that I was canceled by somebody that I cared very deeply about. And I know many of you have experienced the pain of that too. And I do want to say, there could be some blurriness between, what it means to set healthy boundaries versus canceling someone. I am a fan of healthy boundaries, but this is not what that was. And it really wounded my heart and brought up some stuff in me that I thought had long been healed. And I wish that I could tell you that I responded to my circumstance in a different way, but I became really bitter. And as time went on, I became really angry with God. I had a daily rhythm in my life of spending time with God in scripture and in prayer and worship. I loved to sing hymns. I would hum hymns all the time. They would just pour out of me. But during this time when I felt the desire to do that, kind of bubble up in me, I just shut it down. Like I just squashed it in my spirit, which was ironic because the thing I used to tell people when they were going through a hard thing was, don't stop singing. Like keep singing. And I still encourage you to do that. But there was something about this experience for me that made me refuse to do it. I was indignant about it because I couldn't believe that God would allow me to be treated the way that I was being treated. After all the years I had been obedient, after everything I had journeyed through in life, all the things I had to endure and overcome, and all the healing that I had to do, all the fear that I had to push through, all for God, that's what I kept saying. I did this all for you. And I just felt like I was entitled to a different story, to a different outcome, a better outcome, a more deserving outcome. I understand the older brother. I am the older brother. This sense of entitlement, this expectation of a better story, it revealed a truth to me. There can be a disconnect between what we think we deserve and what we actually receive. And that disconnect can deeply influence and shape our contentment and our motivations, and it can fuel our frustrations. It can affect our ability to love and forgive. But pretty much every time we feel like we're not getting what we believe we deserve, or the opportunities we feel we're owed, or the respect or recognition at home or at work or at school or on our sports teams, the promotion or position we've worked hard for, or the happiness and ease of life we think we're entitled to. Anytime we chase after or demand life on our own terms, and to begin to focus more on ourselves than on the lavish love that the Father poured out through his Son on the cross, we risk becoming like one of these brothers. Both of their journeys, though very different, ultimately led to separation from their father. You know, one's journey was a bit more public and obvious, right? The younger son, he left and he lived a wild life. And the other is more internal and hidden, right? The older brother, although he was physically present, in his heart and in his spirit, he was just as far from the father as his brother. In the end, both brothers were lost. Both of them. They both rejected extravagant love. And both of them needed to come back to their father. And here's the thing. It's not an either or scenario. Right? At different times in life, we can find ourselves walking either of these paths clearly, right? I am living proof of that. The question we have to ask is, what kind of heart do we want? A humble heart that's open to God's love and grace and forgiveness, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. For everyone. Or a selfish, hardened heart that keeps us distant from God. You know, during this hard older brother season of my life, I learned in a different and deeper way how very good and patient and tender and kind God is. Because like the father in this parable, God just kept coming out to meet me. He just kept coming out to meet me exactly where I was, in my stubbornness, in my unwillingness to come into the house. He just kept pleading with me, reminding me of his presence, reminding me that he was always with me, reminding me of what I did receive, right? Grace that I did not earn, mercy that I received before I deserved it, an inheritance, a promised inheritance that can never perish or spoil or fade. And he kept inviting me back into his house to feast and to celebrate. And I learned that our Father's heart is always open, always loving, whether we've been prodigal or prideful. You know, and again, my heart melted before God. because of the overwhelming truth that God's love isn't based on what we do or don't do, not on how obedient we've been. It's not dependent on how far we've wandered or how well we follow the rules. It's based on accepting and receiving the Father's love. That's it. David Benner, who is a psychologist and author and spiritual mentor, writes in his book, Surrender to Love, that as he sits with clients, he likes to ask them what they think God thinks about when they come to God's mind, because God is mindful of us. So he asks them, what do you think God thinks of you? And most of them say to him that they think that God is disappointed in them. Or they think that God thinks about all the things that they've done wrong, all the sins that they've committed. And in his book, he disagrees. He says, regardless of what you have come to believe about God based on your life experience, the truth is that when God thinks of you, love swells in his heart and a smile comes to his face. God bursts with love for humans. He is far from being emotionally uninvolved with his creation. God's bias toward us is strong, persistent, and positive. God chooses to be known as love, and that love pervades every aspect of God's relationship with us. No matter how many times we need it, no matter how many times our Father runs to meet us, coming down to where we are with arms wide open. This is the truth of the Christmas story. God so loved the world that he sent his one and only Son to show us what true love really is. God loves us so much that he sent his Son to save us from our sin, from our selfishness, from our pride, from our overindulgence in this world. He came to be our light and to give us hope and reconcile us back to the Father, back to love. And Christmas is a celebration of that love. And we can get lost in all the cultural elements of it, all the presents and the parties and the bows and the baking. And we should throw parties and celebrate and feast together, right? Those are beautiful moments of joy. But let us not forget who it's all for. Let us not forget it is for the greatest gift we have ever been given, our King Jesus. He is our celebration. So today, instead of sharing in communion, we're going to take time to prepare our hearts in a different way. We're going to read through a liturgy together, letting its words just center us on the incredible gift of love that God has given us. You'll see some words on the screen. There's going to be parts that I read and then parts that we will all read together. And then we're going to stand and we're going to raise our voices to sing about the deep joy of Jesus. But if you're in a season where singing feels just a bit too hard, where the weight of life just makes it difficult to lift your voice, I just want to encourage you to simply allow God to come out and meet you. Spirit unto spirit. Just listen for his tender voice saying to you, you are loved. Right? My son, my daughter, you are loved. You are worthy of love. I am always with you, and everything I have is yours. Let that truth just settle into your heart. Let it lead you home, whether you've been prodigal or prideful. Know that there is a joyous celebration waiting for you. So, as we prepare our house for the coming Christmas season, we would also prepare our hearts for the returning Christ. You came once for your people, O Lord, and you will come for us again. Though there was no room at the inn to receive you upon your first arrival, we would prepare you room here in our hearts and here in our home, Lord Christ. As we decorate and celebrate, we do so to mark the memory of your redemptive movement into our broken world, O God. By these small tokens, we affirm that something amazing has happened in time and space. Our wreaths and ribbons and colored lights, our giving of gifts, our parties with friends, these have never been ends in themselves. They are but small ways in which we repeat that sounding joy first proclaimed by angels in the skies near Bethlehem. In view of such great tidings of love announced to us and to all people, how can we not be moved to praise and celebration in this Christmas season? As we decorate our tree and as we feast and laugh and sing together, we are rehearsing our coming joy. We are making ready to receive the one who has already, with open arms, received us. We would prepare you room here in our hearts and here in our home, Lord Christ. Now we celebrate your first coming, Emmanuel, even as we long for your return. O Prince of Peace, our elder brother, return soon. We miss you so. Amen.